Strategist and former chief of staff to Senator Joe Manchin, Chris Kofinas, also Republican strategist Rina Shah. And Chris, I want to start with you and remind people you are the Democrat on this panel right now, and you think that thinking that this bloodbath comment will somehow stain Donald Trump is a mistake for Democrats. Why?
I mean, I'm not trying to make an excuse for his rhetoric, but we've been dealing with how many years of his outrageous, offensive rhetoric? I mean, how many hours and days we've spent talking about how ridiculous Trump is, how offensive he is, all may be justified. Something is not happening with voters, though, because what we've seen, especially over the last 6 months, national polls and almost all the key battleground polls, is that Trump is in a better position now than he was in 20 or even 16. So the question is, why, right? And we have to Democrats have to tackle the why. And the why, in my opinion, is Democrats have not made a strong enough case about what President Biden has done and accomplished, all the positives, and what he's going to do over the next 4 years. I think that the concern I have is if we simply believe that, that Trump is going to either destroy himself or we're going to destroy him, and that will be enough to win the election, I just don't believe it. And the polls, at least as of right now, don't show that's a winning strategy.
Rina, what do you think?
Well, I think this is a scenario in which we have to take the former president for exactly what he does. And we know this because of his track record. He always says what he means and means what he says. And so his use of violent language is purposeful. Whenever he injects a word that is charged, that is meant to scare people into submission. So this is a situation in which two things can be true at the same time. Yes, the word bloodbath was taken out of context. I'm somebody who listens to a lot of financial market talk, and that is a word when used with the auto industry that has been done before. But again, the former president knows what he's doing with language, and therefore we have to take him very literally when he uses certain words, because he wants people on his side to have a sense of being riled up, being angry about a media narrative that's out there, for example, that doesn't square with what they think works. And so you'll see a lot of his side really really direct their ire at media sources. And I think that's essentially what we're looking at here is the start of what will be continually really, really dangerous language. And Trump likes it. We know this.
So, Rina, will you take this one step further and combine it with what Chris was saying right there? You say you take Trump literally. So if Democrats then were to focus on what Trump would do if elected president again, what would that mean? What would you focus on if you were trying to beat him that you could say this is what Donald Trump will actually do in office?
I say paint the picture, really make it illustrative, show the imagery of January 6th, but go beyond that, because we've all seen those visuals and we know who refutes that, his base. But there's a large swath of Americans out there who are disengaged, who aren't always paying attention and need reminders. So every time you are able to paint the picture of what a second term for Trump would look like and for who, then that's when you win. But again, you can only do it with words for so long, and I've seen Biden do it, and I think it's falling on silent ears, frankly. Ears that aren't listening. So the silence essentially from Democrats on exactly how lives will change, I think is actually a negative in their column. So they need to start to really up the ante, and again, be very depictive, use pictures, use imagery, visuals, anything to get people to understand what is at stake, what rights of yours will be on the line if Trump gets a second term in the White House.
So, Chris, another thing that Donald Trump discussed extensively over the weekend in interviews was he keeps saying that he's going to come out with a position on abortion in terms of what he wants to see in the country. And there's been some reporting in the New York Times and others that he is considering supporting a 16-week ban on abortion, although he says he's going to come up with an idea that makes everybody happy. What do you think the risks are for Donald Trump on this issue, political issue, Chris?
Well, I mean, the risks are pretty profound. I mean, what we've seen, I think, both in the midterms and the special elections that have happened, since the Supreme Court decision, is that, you've seen it really mobilize a lot of women, not surprisingly progressives, but also moderate Republicans. And that's why a lot of these races that supposedly were trending Republicans' way turned in a dramatic way the opposite direction. I think the risk for Trump is obvious because he's the one that more or less helped engineer the Supreme Court decision by putting those justices on the court. There's no way to run away from that. And he's clearly trying to minimize the political damage. I don't think it's going to be that, it's going to be possible. Now the question becomes, and this is where it gets, a little bit more complicated, is it going to be a big enough issue in all the key battleground states to make a difference? In some it might, right? And when you're talking essentially 5 to 7 battleground states that are going to decide this election, and it's a really close election, an issue like abortion, especially the way that I think you're going to hear Democrats really focus on this and really target, key demographics, it could be the deciding factor in some of these races. Trump knows that. His campaign knows that. They're going to try to mitigate that. I don't think it's going to be that successful.
Chris Kofinas, Rina Shah, thanks to both of you. Great to talk to you.